Well, the long-lasting negotiations between the European Union and Mercosur towards reaching a free trade agreement and its conclusion in 2019 has pointed out the urgent need to assess the environmental and sustainability impacts of such agreements. In this sense, at CISDL, we have examined the current text and proposed alternatives to this agreement, thinking outside of the box to achieve a fair and sustainable partnership between the EU and the Mercosur countries. Let me share 3 thoughts derived from our research and how this could be achieved. First, while trade agreements may become an instrumental tool to promote environmental objectives, responses should not be limited to these agreements. In our research, we have found out that other post-treaty instruments, including modernization, renegotiation, side layers, and committees' decisions, may have a positive impact on achieving said objectives. Trade agreements are not the only instrument available to develop trade relations between countries, so policymakers should be aware of the possible pathways they have to promote environmental-related objectives. Second, as one of our latest reports on this matter underscores, there is a vital importance of ensuring that these instruments comply with other instruments, as this ensures the credibility and legitimacy of the adopted measures. If we aim to promote sustainable development through trade agreements and other related instruments, they should be compatible with relevant international environmental agreements and promote their objectives. These agreements include, but they are not limited to, for instance, the Paris Agreement and the coming Montreal Framework. Moreover, a truly sustainable development-friendly agreement should be in compliance with international human rights law and ILO standards. Finally, they should be aware of existing international commitments, such as those included within WTO law and more generally in public international law. Only then the instrument would be able to fulfill its objectives in a responsible manner with parties' international commitments. Third, with respect to specific legal instruments available for EU-Mercosur, in our latest report, we present 4 scenarios. These scenarios include the renegotiation of the deal, bilateral partnership on sustainability issues, targeted cooperation, and targeted bilateral strategic partnerships. We conclude that each one of them should be designed to foster the development of sustainable economic activities and discourage those that may have negative environmental consequences. Hence, assessment on the impact of market access measures may have over the ecosystem or local communities should be conducted. This is something that the EU has been progressively integrated into its trade relations, including both ex-ante and ex-post assessment to their trade agreements. Regarding your question of Bolivia, finally, the country has been given the green light to enter the bloc. We must remember that Bolivia has been an associated member of Mercosur for many years, thus participated in various high-level political and technical instances, for which there is much work already developed. Nevertheless, now Bolivia must go through its own internal legislation process to ratify the legal institutional framework of Mercosur, which may be more dependent on domestic Bolivian politics, including the 2025 presidential election, and how intra-Mercosur dynamics change with the new government in Argentina. When it comes to the EU-Mercosur relation, particularly its sustainability dimension, Bolivia presents new challenges as the country has a worrying track record on deforestation, something that could add an additional layer of complexity to the current negotiations and future implementation of the agreement, which should not be overlooked.
Very good afternoon, Professor Alessandra Neyman from the Universidade de Caxias do Sul. I'm very glad and that you took a look at the report and that you're able to give very fruitful comments. Right off the bat, I want to ask the legal section of this Mercosur paper. Professor, is the EU-Mercosur agreement similar or different from other EU trade agreements? And does this change with the new side letters that we have seen between the EU and the Mercosur bloc?
Thank you, Mateus. So I think in comparison with more recent trade deals, and this is something that's highlighted in the study, EU-Mercosur trade and sustainability clauses are less ambitious than other EU FTAs. And I would say that this is unsurprising in a way because the agreement is somehow, so to speak, a product of a different time. It's been negotiated for the past 20 plus years. So, for instance, the text does not consider the Paris Agreement as an essential clause, and it doesn't have country-specific climate cooperation roadmaps. Also, there is no mention of other important sustainability areas such as sustainable finance, clean technologies, critical minerals, trade and gender, and also of one particular issue that I think lies at the heart of trade relations between the two blocs, which is that of sustainable food systems. So Mercosur and the EU have been negotiating additional sustainability commitments. And on the one hand, the EU wants to avoid a, so to speak, a race to the bottom, so as not to reduce the level of ambition of each party's NDCs. And Mercosur, on the other hand, rejects any incorporation of sanctions and any unilateral imposition of EU legislation, and has been calling for the internal legislation and different national circumstances of each of the parties to be considered. So this is why, considering the circumstances, post-treaty mechanisms are so important for current EU-Mercosur negotiations, and so is, of course, timely law and policy analysis to make them more effective.